Hello and a warm welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shoboale. Burkina Faso and Niger have issued a joint statement saying their combined armies have killed 100 Islamist militants in 2 weeks of operations. There's no independent confirmation of the claim, which was issued a day after Burkina Faso's President Roch Kabore sacked his prime minister in the wake of angry protests about increasing casualties caused by jihadist attacks. On Thursday, at least 13 members of a civilian militia fighting the jihadists were killed in the north of the country. The volunteer force was created 3 years ago in an effort to stop Islamist violence from spreading. More than 250 of its members have been killed. Dozens of soldiers and police have also been killed over the past year. And now, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres says the regions most vulnerable to climate change also suffer from insecurity, poverty, weak governance, and the scourge of terrorism, noting that 8 out of 15 countries most exposed to climate risks, 8 host a UN peacekeeping mission or special political mission, but that the effects of climate are superimposed on conflict and worsen fragilities and thereby fuels grievances and mistrust of power. Now, rights group Human Rights Watch says Tigrayan forces executed dozens of civilians in apparent war crimes in 2 towns they controlled in Ethiopia's Amhara region. In a new report, it says the executions occurred between the 31st of August and the 9th of September this year. Witnesses described the HRW investigators that they saw Tigrayan fighters in Chena and Kobo villages kill a total of 49 civilians in separate incidents. However, the Tigrayan forces have not responded to the accusations. The HRW has called on the UN to establish an international probe into war crimes and probe abuses by all parties in the Tigray conflict. Well, UN spokesperson Stefan Dujarric says many people continue to be displaced due to conflict in Ethiopia's Amhara, Afar and Western Tigray. Speaking to reporters, Dujarric said tens of thousands of people have been uprooted from their homes, while many are believed to have fled Western Tigray to Tigray's northwestern zone. Despite this, Mr. Dujarric says humanitarians continue to deliver assistance and critical services across the region. Some updates from the COVID-19 pandemic now. The Ghanaian government says from midnight on Sunday, all visitors to the country need to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19 before being allowed to enter. A statement from the country's health service says Ghanaians who intend to return to the country in the next fortnight are exempted, but will be vaccinated upon arrival. The statement adds that all Ghanaians traveling out of the country are also to be fully vaccinated. The order is part of measures to help control the spread of the Omicron variant of COVID-19. The health service statement says that most cases of the variant in the country were from people who had arrived at the international airport in Accra, and the majority of those people had been unvaccinated. Ghana has recorded just over 130,000 cases of coronavirus in total and 1,200 deaths. Well, as South Africa grapples with managing a surge in COVID positivity, the Health Department has given the go-ahead for 12 to 17-year-olds to receive their second doses of the Pfizer vaccine. This has to be 6 months after the first was taken. Also, the South African Health Products Regulatory Agency has approved for adults who have been fully Pfizer vaccinated to receive a booster shot. More information is still expected on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Briefing the nation today, Minister of Health, Dr. Joe Fowler, says vaccines remain the best line of defense, even against the Omicron variant, which seems more transmissible but with less severe sickness.
There are some indications that some of this, there might be some weaknesses in as far as some of the vaccines. Some of the reports indicated there might be some weaknesses on the Pfizer, but again, this is very early. But overall, what we are seeing is that the protection is still very strong, even on this variant, as I've said. At least those who have been admitted to hospital, it shows up to 70% being those who have not been vaccinated. The PCR tests are still very effective. Also, in terms of the rapid antigen test, also shown to be very effective in picking up this variant as well. Current treatments are also still very relevant: steroids, corticosteroids, oxygen therapy, antivirals, anticoagulants. All this, which have been used over the last 20 months or more, have shown to be very effective. The issue of infection of children, let me just touch on that. During the 3-week period from 14 November to 4 December, there has been an increase in admission of children under 5 years. This has been observed in the Tshwane Metro hospitals, where the early resurgence has occurred. Children 18 years and younger comprised 21% of admissions during the early period. However, this pattern has changed over the time, over the subsequent time from the early days, and the proportion of admissions in children less than 5 years in total admissions has decreased to 14%. It was 21, then 14% in week 46, and currently it's even lower at 8%. So this seemed to have been the phenomenon early, but it has now changed to more adults getting infected.
Meanwhile, the travel ban on Southern Africa as a result of the emergence of the Omicron variant continues to impact the tourism industry in South Africa. Rushdie Harper's tour company in Cape Town was just starting to recover from the lockdown, which had forced him to sell his house just to keep the business going when international travel took a nosedive.
Rushdie Harper's tour company in Cape Town was just starting to recover from a disastrous COVID-19 lockdown that had forced him to sell his house just to keep the business going. The Omicron variant of the coronavirus struck.
Not a booking in advance because we only take 30 people on a boat.
Until then, Harper's Wow Travel and Tours, for which foreigners make up 80% of the business, had been looking forward to a bumper Christmas season when travelers from a cold northern hemisphere, mostly Britain, the United States and Germany, typically head south for the sun. But Omicron's sudden emergence last month prompted the imposition of international travel curbs on southern Africa.
50% of our bookings actually were cancelled for December alone. And at the moment, for January, is about 40% that have been cancelled. So in terms of giving you figures, that would turn up to, as a small business like ours, we're a very small business, that's probably about R1 million worth of business that has been lost.
In 2019 and 2020, the UK, Germany and the US were South Africa's top 3 sources of foreign tourists, according to statistics from South Africa. But the lockdown and travel restrictions have seen tourists from these countries and others, such as Australia and France, drop.
When we did a SNAP survey from the tour operators, it was about R1 billion worth of cancellation. That was on just SNAP survey. It could be more. That doesn't include airlines cancellations. That doesn't include the expenditure that the tourists were going to spend at restaurants or at courier shops, for transport, and many other things that they could have done on top of what they already had booked.
In Soweto's popular Vilakazi Street, where 2 Nobel Peace Prize winners, Nelson Mandela and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, used to live, tourist guides, street vendors and restaurants are feeling the pinch. The huge influx of visitors that normally frequented the street are nowhere to be seen.
We need inbound tourism. We do have a market for domestic tourism, but it is not as viable economically as much as the international travelers, because it's about the spending power.
Abundant wildlife, stunning scenery, and renowned vineyards have made South Africa one of the world's big long-haul travel destinations, establishing tourism as a pillar of the economy.
Still on the COVID-19 pandemic, the World Health Organization says studies show that cases caused by the Omicron variant appear to be less severe, with the hospitalization rate lower than the Delta variant. WHO Africa's Immunization and Vaccine Development Program Manager, Richard Mihigo, notes that the Omicron variant is now surfaced in 10 African countries. Of some 1,000 cases worldwide, about 46% have been found in Africa.
Emerging data from South Africa suggests that Omicron may cause less severe disease. Data which looked at hospitalization across the country between 14 November and 4th December found that ICU occupancy was only 6.3%, which is very low compared with the same period when South Africa was facing the peak, which was linked at that time to Delta variant, and I'm talking about July this year.
So other stories now. Dozens of inmates from Boma prison in the west of the Democratic Republic of Congo have escaped. The prisoners were said to have taken advantage of loud music that was playing at a funeral in the neighborhood to distract the guards. Some 9 inmates were arrested near the prison and 1 injured as guards fired gunshots in the air. Local media reports that another 19 inmates are still at large. Well, this is not the first time prisoners are breaking out of Boma. There's been several other jailbreaks at the prison, which locals say is in urgent need of upgrading. Ahead of his briefing to the UN Security Council next week, the special representative of the Secretary General in South Sudan and the head of the United Nations mission in South Sudan is urging political leaders to make a fresh push to fully implement the peace agreement in the country so that free, fair and peaceful elections can be held. Nicholas Haysom says the young nation's fragile peace process is under serious threat due to slow progress.
And walk away. There cannot be a business as usual approach. The parties must inject fresh urgency into the process and demonstrate a sustained collective political will to finalize critical areas of the agreement. This includes the transitional security arrangements, legislation promoting financial and judicial reforms, and constitution making, so that elections can be held. Will there come a time in which people say the peace agreement has lost credibility? We're not saying that. We've been saying consistently to people, please believe in the peace agreement, please work at it.
Well, back to the security situation in the Sahel region following the announcement by Burkina Faso and Niger saying their combined armies have killed 100 Islamist militants in 2 weeks of operations. We're now being joined by security analyst Chidi Nwanu for more on this. Thank you so much for your time on the program. Could we call this a win for the joint armies of these countries, killing over 100 militants as part of efforts to secure the Sahel region?
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. It could be described as a victory for Burkina Faso and Nigerian forces allegedly killing this number of armed insurgents and also destroying their bases. But at the same time, insurgents, again, we're not sure who, killed a few civilian militia elsewhere in the country. Now, what this tells you is that whilst the security forces might have victory in one part, they'll also have defeat in another part, because unlike the security forces, the insurgents don't need to be in a certain place at a certain time. They're fluid and they can move around. But as long as the Burkinabés and Nigerians can build on this and continue the momentum that was gained from this operation, then they're sure to, derive some gains from it. But as the political elements of it shows, as in the resignation of the Burkinabe government, there are much deeper elements to this, especially in terms of governance and development, and also finding, non-kinetic ways to resolve community disputes.
Well, the insecurity situation in the Sahel region has been ongoing for years now. What steps should governments affected continue to take to successfully bring to an end the reign of insurgency?
As I've alluded to, the main effort should be on the non-kinetic ways in which you would eradicate this problem. So there's many problems of governance, of development, of environmental issues, lack of water, lack of access to resources, lack of access to jobs, to education, also lack of just hope in the future, and also a population explosion. Now, all of these can be managed by responsible governments, by government just, essentially doing the job of governing. And unfortunately, in many African countries, particularly in the Sahel, governments are more about patronage and power than about actual governance. So I think that without going into the details of each country in the Sahel, the main thing is that the governments need to start looking towards the needs of the people. And there will always be a place for, the kinetic efforts, the military, the police and force. But the main thing that's going to take away the fire of this insurgency is, providing a credible alternative to the insurgents. So taking away the incentive for young men to pick up arms, and also taking away the incentive for local people to either be coerced or intimidated to supporting the armed men.
All right, then, security analyst Chidinwanu, thank you so much for your thoughts on the program. Over in Cameroon, according to recent analysis by the United Nations Humanitarian Office, over 700,000 children have been impacted by school closures due to violence in the northwest and southwest regions of the country. During their joint visit to the country, the Secretary General of the Norwegian Refugee Council and the Director of Education Cannot Wait called for an end to the attacks on education.
According to the United Nations, 2 out of 3 schools are closed in the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon. And just 2 weeks ago, 4 students and a teacher were killed in an attack in the country. There's been reports on other violent attacks on students and teachers. A recent lockdown imposed by a non-state armed group from September the 15th to October the 2nd limited access to basic services including health and education. The lockdown and insecurity have forced UN agencies and aid organizations, including the Norwegian Refugee Council, to temporarily suspend the delivery of life-saving aid to people in need in both the northwest and southwest regions. Over 1 million children also need urgent education support in the region due to the crisis.
I'm a vocal point for girls, especially in this crisis area or this crisis time. I've come in contact with a lot of girls who have gone through a lot of trauma. People have been raping them. People have been harassing them. Some of them cannot even stay in class because they are not well fed.
To address these multiple emergencies, Education Cannot Wait, ECW, the UN Global Fund for Education in Emergencies and Crisis, is working closely with other agencies, including the Norwegian Refugee Council, to build a multi-year resilience program in Cameroon.
Education Cannot Wait is here in Cameroon together with Norwegian Refugee Council and UNICEF. And what we see is targeted attacks against schools. The most affected are the girls, because they are then subjected to gender-based violence and early pregnancies.
ECW is contributing $25 million over 3 years and is calling for other donors to fill the gap, which is estimated at $50 million. When fully funded, the program will provide approximately 250,000 children and adolescents with access to safe and protective learning environments in the most affected areas.
We're now in Littoral, in the southern part of Cameroon. Into this province, people flee from the southwest and the northwest in Cameroon. They flee from horrific violence, horrific situations where their villages have been torched, their schools have been closed, and they come here because there's some safety here. But you can see the school, it's cramped beyond belief. There are 600 students here, nearly all of them are displaced children from the conflict to the West.
9 out of 10 regions of Cameroon continue to be impacted by one of 3 complex humanitarian crises: the crisis in the northwest and southwest, conflict in the far north, and a refugee crisis involving people who have fled the Central African Republic. The UN agencies hope the investment will also ensure refugee children fleeing from the Central African Republic receive access to quality protective learning environments.
Welcome to our Africa Tech segment. Over 2,000 women from underserved communities in Nigeria are set to be empowered with employable digital skills through a UK government-funded DigiGirls program. The aim of the training is to close the digital gender gap that is causing the low employment rate of women and girls.
Globally, when it comes to digital adoption, there's still a large gap in the use of technology by women and girls when compared to their male counterparts. To address this digital gender divide, the UK government, in partnership with CyberSafe Foundation, is empowering over 2,000 girls and women under its DigiGirls training program.
The goal is to close the digital gender gap that is causing unemployment and underemployment of women and girls, especially for the underserved and vulnerable in our communities. DigiGirls is not just timely, but a much-needed intervention. Would also tackle gender-based violence through economic empowerment of women. Will also support inclusive and sustainable economic recovery post-pandemic. Will also increase the number of digitally skilled Nigerians and foster lasting poverty reduction and alleviate tough economic realities for women and girls in Nigeria.
The British High Commissioner to Nigeria says the UK government is committed to supporting Nigeria in its quest to grow the country's digital economy.
What we're doing with the DigiGirls program is to make sure that technology is available not just to those who already can access it quite easily, who have the tools and the money, but those who have the ideas and the potential but don't necessarily have the tools, the skills and the money. So we want to bridge the digital divide, but it's through programs like this, recognising there's talent out there, but people at the moment who haven't got that access, we want to ensure they've got it. Secondly, it's ensuring broadband rolls out, because nobody can do anything without broadband. So we've been working with government on right-of-way, ensuring accessibility and, of course, cost.
Beneficiaries of the program are grateful for the opportunity, which they say has been impactful.
Digital Girls has been so impactful because they help us understand that we can become somebody with technology, not just for the guys alone. Tech is also for girls. So it's not just about digital marketing, graphic design, e-commerce, and this is going to help us be independent on ourselves.
The DigiGirls program will, over the next 6 months, provide digital and soft skill training to girls and women with the goal to close the digital gender gap.
And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shivoale.